Okay, one important note I would like to make. First of all, before I make this important note, I'm going to go back and turn off the monitor because that's pretty annoying. I'll also have an opportunity then to double check to make sure the recording is moving. It is. The disc is spinning. So what I want to do is make a note that under pre-production, as we were talking about setting a budget, is other pre-production activities might include looking at stock footage. I think we already talked about picking talent and looking at talent costs and arranging talent. I think we talked about arranging travel. This is a note I'm making going back to pre-production because as we're getting into the, like we do in a lot of actual productions, we forget about stuff we should have done in pre-production. Now we're making this video, I'm forgetting about stuff we should have listed in pre-production. How about that? So let's think about a prop master or a production that would need props, or the product placement, or if we're shooting, like we were using the example of shooting cars, and we'd need to arrange a bunch of cars. But we need to really think about the props. We got a whole storage room full of props that belong to Joanne and Sterling. And so we would not want to mention any specific customer names, even if I say Lowe's, or even if I were to accidentally say Goodyear, or Sterling, or Joanne. In this content, I would never want to mention any company by name. And for whoever's transcribing and helping me, God bless you, whoever's transcribing this and helping me put this presentation together, but can't even stop long enough to take a drink of water. Okay, so we're going back to pre-production. This note, again, is related to making sure pre-production is accurate. We'd want to make sure we include a note about a prop master or some person that works on props. Some person that works on travel, I think we discussed that already. Some person that might work with talent, do a talent search. We didn't really discuss the talent search enough in that. That's something that comes up a lot, the talent search and auditioning talent. That role would be the casting director, perhaps. I think that's what it's called, right? Somebody that's going to go through the stock footage library, or even make the decision if we are going to shoot video, do it as an animation or some motion graphics piece, or are we going to use stock video to represent whatever it is we want to represent. So let's get into it with getting into a section called post-production. And do we put things like talent and props and all of that? That's why we would want to go back to pre-production. And this is what we ought to do in this video. In this, we went from, let's list them all out for a second, because let's try to keep it organized. Now that I got my brain thinking all this through. All right, because this video is going, gosh, how did we do it? We had producer, right? I can't remember now. We have like scouting the locations and all that stuff. And then we had pre-production. And then we did the whole thing on production. And then we're going to get into post-production. Which I can break that down later with organizing and all that stuff. And then we're going to have approval and delivery. A delivery distribution. I think we would just not call it approval, but I just scratched out an erasable item. It's certainly erasable, I just scratched it out. Look at that. We'll call it distribution and a delivery and distribution, and all of that kind of stuff. But there's a segment I think we left out. So we called it, what did we call it, producer or concept, the very initial, discussion. What did we call this? I don't quite remember, but it was like project initiation. That's where they take it out and haze the project to initiate. No, that is project initiation, or something the producer, they come up with the original concept or the idea phase, right? So the idea phase, pre-production. But then as we get into pre-production, there's a certain amount of, there's an expense that happens here. Because as you get into pre-production, there's purchases that need to be made. And this is where some spending happens. And when I think of spending, I started thinking about stock photography and stock video. And you think in a proper environment, in a proper production process, you might want to buy this stuff as part of pre-production rather than, okay, in post-production. So there's a thing that happens here called acquisition, and we need to, acquiring elements, basically we're going to spend money, and I don't know how to describe it in the process. We're going to spend. We're going to shop. We're going to acquire stuff. We're going to, and all of this under pre-production, there needs to be some consideration in the process for the fact that in the budgeting that we are going to buy, we're going to book talent. Here's what we're going to spend on. We're going to book travel. We're going to book talent. We're going to buy stock photography. And the reason you say this is because you want to consider all this in pre-production. It might be wise to advise clients, anybody watching this presentation, that we take a look at all of these costs as we're getting into production, before we're getting into production, really, as we're working through pre-production. So travel costs, talent, stock photography, location scouting. You know, one thing we left out looking back to pre-production is the cost of the location fee. We're going to shoot at the Cleveland Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they charge $500. I'm making up a number. They charge $500. And we can't really use any specific examples like that in the presentation. Didn't I just say that? I guess I did. So we're going to shoot at the local museum. That's a great way. Let's call it the local museum in this piece. So we're going to shoot at the local museum, and they charge a $500 per day fee. So you make a donation to the museum, the local art museum, and we're allowed to shoot there for $500. And part of pre-production is acquiring all of the information about all of the costs of all of these things. And some of these things we may or may not buy. We might after, the shopping. Part of pre-production is shopping. Oh my gosh, how could we leave out a talent search? That's what we want to really drive home, is the effort to the casting work, the talent search. And in the world of higher end video production, we really need to consider that as part of pre-production, we are really spending a lot of time acquiring things, buying things. We're procuring on behalf of our client. Does any of that shit make sense? I don't know. It does. It better. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just roll right into this because before we get into post-production, I started thinking about things like stock photography. We would also include stock photography or video. Location. There's another thing to consider too is, animation might be part of post-production, but there is absolutely no reason why animation has to be done at the end of the project. I'm sure it would make a lot of sense that as we're preparing to do a video, we're preparing for the shoot, that the animators could begin working on the product animation or the motion graphics leading up to the shoot. So production is, of course, the day of shooting or the multiple days of shooting, but going into production, why couldn't we say, as we go through this, all of this, that production continues? Why does production have to be limited just to the day of shooting? Can production include, as we kind of work through our philosophy of it, because some might think, well, because we're sitting in an editing, it feels like editing because we're sitting in front of a computer and we're working in software and things are happening in front of us that look cool and creative, so therefore that should be post-production. But what if production part 2 included the development of graphics and animation? Should we put this there in production? We're producing. So what if we were to start thinking about motion graphics? We do these after the fact, don't we? we create the motion graphics in a post-production environment. But what if we were to somehow, let's think this through as a company. What if we say production includes, and again, we're going to go with simple DIY to 0. Means the client made a couple of PowerPoints and provided them. So that budget for motion graphics and animation is 0. All right? So production would include also motion graphics, animation, and let's be thinking about this. I love this idea that, again, production includes developing the graphics, perhaps even on the same day as the shoot is, maybe even before the shoot is happening. So let's just run through production of, let's call it graphic production. All right? So simple, and then let's say, what were my other terms? Standard, premium, and then elaborate. Okay. So then let's go down here, since we're production part 2, graphic production, and then we'll put in post-production. I'm just going crazy here, but that's why we're doing this as a rough draft. We're just getting it all spread out. Post-production includes a color correction. Well, let's see, capturing and review. Capturing and review. Picking sound bites. Right? Here's a good example. Production might include recording the voiceover. That's a production activity, right? Recording the audio. That's a production activity. So, picking the sound bites, capturing review sound bites down here would fall under post-production. Let's say sound bites, let's say color grading footage. So capturing, reviewing, and what's another term? Converting the footage. I guess that capturing and reviewing and conversion. Anything you might do to prep the footage, right? So maybe color grading might be part of conversion, but picking sound bites and all of that, and just generally organizing the elements. Organizing elements. Let's call post-production the point at which all of the production is done. And you're sitting down and post-production could probably begin as production is wrapping up. There could be some overlap. You begin the assembling elements and looking at the first or second day's worth of footage in a post-production environment as other days of shooting still continue. So these could be happening together. But let's just line item them, okay? In motion graphics, we're not going to have any motion graphics in the simple project. We're not going to have any animation, and we're going to have a very simple, we're going to record audio and we're going to do it on the iPhone. So this is all the DIY, just 0. Just for the sake of argument to show that a video production could really have no cost at all. And it's because you didn't do any motion graphics, you didn't do any animation, and you recorded your audio on a phone, and you as the client, the marketing person, you were the voice talent. So in a standard production, let's say that we budget $1,000 for motion graphics. We're still not going to do an animation. It's a standard production. It's just fine. And we're going to spend $500 for the portion of the day and the equipment and the room needed to record the voiceover. This is the scenario perhaps where we have a $500 or $800 voiceover talent, and he comes in and we record him in a studio. And of course, a lot of voice talent can just send you the thing, and we don't even need the recording audio time. Quite honestly, that's probably the way to do it, is to say that in the standard, recording the audio was included in the talent fee, because for $800, a lot of voiceover people will just record the script and send it to you and send you a bill for $800, and it falls under the talent fee. So under the standard, you might not even have a recording audio. Let's say in a premium environment, you spend $1,500 on motion graphics. You do an animation, and that's $2,500. okay? And then we're going to have the audio person come in and read the script in our audio recording center so that we can do quality control and listen to it right there, and we're going to use somebody local. And that time is a morning in the audio studio, and let's say that has a value of $500. And certainly an elaborate is sky's the limit, $5,000 on this. And animation might be you spent 10 grand on an incredible product animation at the big animation studio, came in and did all this stuff, and recording audio, and you spent $2,000 at a fancy audio studio in New York or Nashville or LA, and you did all that. I mean, who knows? The sky's the limit under elaborate, right? That's just for the fun discussion idea, when most of what we're doing in mid-market stuff happens in the standard and premium brackets. And the other thing we'll add too, just kind of out of order, but again, this being the rough draft to help us organize all these crazy thoughts, is that post-production might include effects, special effects, because a special effect is something that you would would obviously make out of the footage or out of something that you created, and maybe, oh gosh, how could you forget, would compositing, effects and compositing might be together, simply because you might, this is definitely what you would consider as post-production, because it's probably making something out of elements that you produced, something you shot in the field, or a photograph supplied by the client. So compositing and effects and all this I would consider falling under the post-production world. Compositing, essentially, I always think of, or effects could be your green screen work. And again, I would put green screen under the post-production world, because you're working with something that you produced, and you're in a post-production. You've already produced it, and now you're editing it. So obviously, something is missing here in post-production. As I say the word editing the footage. Just very simple cuts, cutting it together, editing. Why is that? I guess, that happens if you're going through sound bites, you're kind of doing a pre-edit, right? As you're capturing and reviewing, and you're changing all your footage to ProRes or whatever file format you want to, you're getting it all out of 4K and doing the work in Lightroom or DaVinci or what have you, then that might also be some pre-edit. And I'm going too far with this. So conversion and capturing, review, conversion, pre-edit. We go through and we kind of look at the footage just to see what we have. So pre-edit might fall into there. Okay. So obviously, if our guy's doing it himself and he just has the editing software at his office, then we just do zeros all the way down. This is the do-it-yourself guy that's picking out the sound bites. He's able to capture. This is the guy that is the client that doesn't need a video production company because he's got the software and he's just doing it at his office. So this, again, to make the point that the video production budget could be zero or it could be $1 million. I like my zeros right there. Okay, but standard. Let's say in our video, our 3-minute example with a day or two of shooting, at a day's worth of, let's say you got a day's worth of editing to capture, review, and sort, and you spend another day going through sound bites at $750. You do color grading, and that's the whole day's worth of work at $750. I'm just putting down these $750s for fun. All right, organizing elements. Maybe that's $500, right? And effects and compositing. I don't know if we're going to have a lot of effects or compositing on a standard. You're not going to, but editing, you got the bulk of the work here at $1,500. Just edit the whole thing. Once you assemble all the elements in a standard production, you get $1,500 to edit. What a mess of chicken scratch. Good luck making any sense out of any of this. All right, let's look at the premium production, right? Let's say that you're capturing a bunch of footage. I'm going to just put I'm going to double this, $1,500 for a couple of days of capturing, conversion, sound bites. You might still be at $1,500. We're really getting into a lot of work here, right? I don't know, maybe I think going through, no matter how many days, you could probably get all your sound bites in a day. Let's leave that. Color grading, you can pick what you want. You're still shooting doing your color correction in a day or so. Organizing all the elements. We're still, Okay, let's say in a premium production we're going to spend $1,000 on effects and $1,000 on compositing, and I'll just put 0 and 1,000 on compositing and green screen. It's all together, and then $2,000 on the editing and assembly of everything. So, 1,500. You can add all these numbers up: 2, 3, 4, 55, 6,000, $7,500 in post production right here. Let me get some totals. Am I off the screen here? No, I'm not. $7,500. And, in this one we got $1,500, $2,250, $2,750, $4,000 or so in a standard post-production environment. And the guy that did it in his office on his little iMovie, 0. This guy is providing a lot of value to his company. He's a good American. All right, let's look at elaborate. Certainly, I am now way over here now. Now I'm over here where I haven't been. It's a little awkward. See, I can't really do this. That's painful. So I think the best way to do this one would just be to say, all of this is, let's say the whole post-production bill for some elaborate production was $40,000, right? You just did tons of footage review, $2,000. I can't take this and divide it all over. I'll be here all day. So you did $2,000 in this. You did color grading. You got $2,500 for that guy. Effects. We spent $10,000. That's when you start getting into compositing. You got another guy at $10,000 doing all that. And the green screen work and editing was 15. I think I might have done. I think if I changed it to 14. Yeah, you can divide it out there. You see how we're just exponentially increasing each line item. And we'll have to get a math major to come in here and figure out what the hell I did here. But let's do it. Can we find a math major? Probably not in this group. But that's what we're talking about here, is the idea that to come up with the budget, and why couldn't we do quotes that, is this breaking it down too much? If any marketing person in America would watch this 40-minute presentation on how to establish a budget for a video, they'd be bored out of their minds. They would just say, forget it, we're not going to do a video, and this guy's crazy. Or I'm not even, I give up. I can't handle it anymore, and I'm going home, and you know what, we're just going to make a brochure, and this is just too complicated. Just forget it all. Just shut it down. That's probably what they would do. I will not include that kind of emotion in the presentation. I certainly won't tell anybody to shut it down. All right, so we're going to stop the recording, and we're going to take a quick look at all of this. Can we even see it? No, chicken scratch. Chicken scratch. I'm going to kind of just pan up here, over here a little bit, and see if we can make any sense of what I said here. Boy, again, I feel terrible for the person that has to transcribe all of this.